The doorbell rang at exactly 8:17 a.m. Rachel froze. Halfway through her morning coffee, her body went rigid, a familiar cold creeping up her spine. She wasn't expecting anyone, but something told her, deep, instinctual, that this wasn't just anyone. She opened the door slowly, heart thundering. A boy stood there, about 15, tall for his age, thin, brown eyes, steady gaze. He held a worn piece of paper in his hand, folded and refolded until the edges were frayed. "Are you Rachel Monroe?" he asked, voice clear but cautious. She nodded, confused. Then he held out the paper. "You left this with me." "At the hospital. I'm Ethan." Time stopped. Rachel's breath caught in her chest. Her legs weakened beneath her. For a second, everything around her dissolved. The walls, the doorway, the street outside. All she saw was his face, the face she used to dream about, the one she'd tried for years to forget. There he was, flesh and blood. The baby she had swaddled in silence and left behind 15 years ago. Now a young man standing at her door, holding the past in his hands and looking her straight in the eye. Before we dive deeper, don't miss a single story that could change the way you see life. Subscribe now and turn on the bell. This channel is your place for raw, real journeys like this one. Be part of a community that feels, forgives, and never looks away. Rachel Monroe grew up in a small conservative town in Indiana, the kind of place where church bells dictated the rhythm of the week and silence sat heavy at dinner tables. Her parents, devout and distant, believed in rules more than they believed in love. Rachel followed those rules like scripture, until the day she couldn't anymore. By 17, Rachel had dreams far bigger than her zip code. She wanted to be a singer, not famous, just free. Music was the only place she felt seen. In her bedroom, late at night, she'd hum quietly into her pillow, imagining stages far from cornfields and gossip. Then came Jason Miller, older, charismatic, dangerous in a way that felt exciting at first and terrifying soon after. He isolated her from friends, made her feel special one day and worthless the next. When she found out she was pregnant, she couldn't breathe. Her parents would disown her. Jason vanished, and Rachel, she unraveled. She hid the pregnancy for months, wearing baggy clothes and faking stomach flu. When contractions hit, she lied to a neighbor, saying she needed a ride to the ER for appendicitis. Hours later, she held a tiny baby boy in her arms. He barely cried. She named him Ethan, whispered it just once, and then she left him, wrapped in a second-hand blanket with a note that said, "Please give him the life I can't." She placed him on a bench in the hospital's emergency entrance and walked away. Not because she didn't love him, but because she did. In the years that followed, Rachel disappeared into herself. She moved states, changed her hair, her job, even her name for a while. But nothing silenced the ache. Every birthday passed like a countdown she didn't want to face. Every child's laugh on the street cut like a blade. She told no one, not even the man she dated briefly in her 20s. She convinced herself it was better that way. Safer, cleaner. But at night, when the world went quiet, she would imagine Ethan's face, older, smiling, wondering. And now, 15 years later, that imagined face stood at her door, real, breathing, asking for answers she'd spent her entire adult life avoiding. Rachel never wanted to be a mother, not because she didn't believe in love, but because she never felt it for herself. All she ever wanted was a way out, a stage, a microphone, a quiet room with her guitar. Music made sense when nothing else did. In a world full of cold glares and quiet disapproval, melodies were her escape. She dreamed of Nashville, late nights writing songs that would say everything she couldn't. That dream wasn't about fame. It was about finally breathing. At 17, she applied secretly to a community college with a music program 2 states away. She recorded a rough demo on a borrowed recorder, sang until her voice cracked, and mailed it off with trembling hands. It was the bravest thing she'd ever done. When she got the acceptance letter, she didn't scream or cry. She just held it close like it was fragile. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with hope. She had a plan now. She would leave. She would sing. She would finally be someone. But then came Jason. He noticed her after a small church performance, told her she had a voice like pure honey. He said all the right things, made her feel like she mattered. And in a house where no one had ever looked her in the eye and said, "You're enough," Jason's attention felt like oxygen. He pulled her into his world, slowly and methodically. At first, it felt like freedom. Sneaking out to meet him at night, singing in his car, dreaming out loud. But things changed fast. He became possessive, jealous. He mocked her dreams, called them childish, told her Nashville was a joke, that no one would want a girl like her. When she told him she was pregnant, his voice turned ice cold. "Not my problem," he said, backing away like she was contagious. Rachel sat alone in the back of the public library for 3 hours after that, staring at a future that had just burned to ash. Her dreams didn't die all at once. They dissolved slowly. The music stopped making sense. The stage felt farther and farther away. She still had the letter from the music school, hidden in a box beneath her bed, folded next to her demo CD. But even touching it made her stomach turn, because now everything had changed. She wasn't a girl chasing freedom anymore. She was a frightened teenager, pregnant, alone, and invisible. And her dream, the one that once felt so close she could almost taste it. It was slipping through her fingers, one note at a time. Rachel didn't tell a soul, not her parents, not her best friend from church, not even the school counselor who once told her, "You can talk to me anytime." The shame was too loud and the fear too heavy. She started to disappear piece by piece. She wore oversized hoodies even in the summer heat, avoided mirrors, skipped meals. Her body was changing, but she couldn't afford to let anyone notice. At night, she'd sit on the bathroom floor, rocking gently, whispering apologies to a baby who wasn't even born yet. By the 8th month, her world was silent. She'd dropped out of choir, stopped playing guitar. She avoided Jason completely. He'd blocked her number anyway. Her parents never looked past her tired eyes or sudden weight gain. Maybe they suspected. Maybe they just didn't want to know. The night she went into labor, Rachel knew she couldn't stay. She waited until the house was asleep, then knocked on the door of a neighbor who barely knew her. "Stomach pain," she said. "Maybe an infection." The woman drove her to the hospital in silence. The contractions were fast, violent. She bit into her arm to keep from screaming. When Ethan was born, he didn't cry at first. Rachel panicked. But then came the softest sound, fragile, tired, but alive. They let her hold him, just once. His fingers were tiny, curling instinctively around hers. He had her nose, Jason's dark eyes. Rachel stared at him for what felt like hours, memorizing a face she knew she wouldn't be allowed to keep. She wrapped him in a blue blanket she'd stolen from the hospital supply cart, folded the note carefully. "His name is Ethan. Please love him." Then she waited until the nurse left. In the early morning, barefoot and bleeding, Rachel stepped into the cold hallway. She placed Ethan on a bench near the emergency entrance, kissed his forehead, and walked away. She didn't look back. The weeks that followed were a blur. She moved across state lines using money saved for college, took a job at a diner, changed her last name, told people she'd dropped out of school for personal reasons. Every night she thought about that bench. Every morning she tried to forget. But forgetting isn't healing. It's hiding. And Rachel was about to find out that the past has a way of finding you, especially when it's made of flesh, blood, and 15 years of unanswered questions. Rachel's apartment was always quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe, but suffocates. She'd come home after a long shift at the grocery store, drop her keys on the counter and sit in the dark. No TV, no music, just silence, and the endless ache of something missing. At 33, her life was small. Wake up, work, go home, repeat. No friends, no family. She spoke to her co-workers just enough to get by, always with a tight smile that said, "Please don't ask." No one did. The guilt she carried had carved her hollow. 15 years had passed, but every moment since that night at the hospital had been shaped by it. She tried to build a new identity. Rachel the cashier, Rachel the neighbor who watered her plants, Rachel who kept her head down. But inside, she was always the girl who left her baby behind. She couldn't forgive herself. She didn't believe she should. Some nights the dreams came back. In them, she was holding Ethan again, only for him to vanish in her arms. Other nights, he would be older, running down a hallway, calling her name, but never turning around. The worst were the mornings after, waking up drenched in sweat, hands shaking, tears dried on her cheeks. One night, Rachel found herself staring at a bottle of sleeping pills. She wasn't planning anything, not really. She just held the bottle and wondered what it would feel like to finally stop, to let the weight fall off her chest and disappear. But something stopped her, her face. Not Ethan's as a baby, but a boy, maybe 15, maybe older, standing at a door. Her door. He didn't say anything, just looked at her, eyes full of questions. That image haunted her. She didn't know why it felt so real, so vivid. But it lingered. Then, 3 weeks later, the doorbell rang. When Ethan showed up, Rachel was already empty. Not numb, just used up. Her life had been lived in regret. One long apology that no one ever heard. Seeing him didn't bring joy. It brought fear. Because now she couldn't hide anymore. He stood there, the very embodiment of everything she'd tried to outrun. And yet, somehow, he wasn't angry. Not at first. He just looked. The days after that encounter were the lowest she had ever felt. Ethan didn't call, didn't come back. She sat by the window for hours, hoping, dreading, replaying the moment in her head until it twisted into something unbearable. What if he hated her? What if he had only come to say it to her face? What if that was the last time she'd ever see him? Rachel stopped eating, barely slept. Work became impossible. She took a leave of absence, pretending it was for health reasons. In truth, her health had nothing to do with her body. One afternoon, sitting on the floor of her living room surrounded by boxes of old notebooks and unopened mail, she found the letter. The college acceptance letter. Still in its envelope, still folded next to the demo CD she hadn't touched in over a decade. She picked it up with trembling hands and cried like she hadn't cried in years. Not for the dream she lost, not even for Ethan, but for the girl she used to be, the girl who wanted to sing, the girl who believed in something, the girl who, for a brief moment, thought she was strong enough to make her life her own. Rachel didn't know what healing looked like, but she knew this couldn't be the end. Not like this. If this moment is stirring something in you, memories, regrets, or even hope, pause for just a second. Hit the like button to let us know you're here, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your story, your voice, might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. The knock came 2 days later, not the doorbell, just a soft, almost hesitant knock. Rachel's heart jolted. She opened the door slowly, unsure what she wanted to find. Ethan stood there, hands in his hoodie pockets, eyes fixed on the ground. "I'm not here to yell," he said. I need to understand." Rachel stepped aside in silence, letting him in. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. A chasm of years and questions between them. Rachel tried to speak, but her voice cracked before a word could form. Ethan pulled out the note. The one she left with him at the hospital. "I've read this 100 times, he said quietly. "You said you loved me, that you couldn't give me the life I deserved, but I've always wondered, did you ever want me?" Rachel's hands trembled. "I did," she said. "More than anything, but I was broken, scared. I thought I was protecting you by letting you go." He nodded slowly, eyes glassy but unreadable. Rachel wanted to reach for him, to say more, but didn't know how. After he left that day, she sat there for hours, still and stunned. It wasn't relief she felt, it was possibility. For the first time in years, she saw a flicker of something different, Not forgiveness, not yet, but a door not fully closed. That same night, her neighbor Mrs. Jenkins knocked with a plate of leftover pie. The older woman had always sensed something buried in Rachel. "You look like someone who just got punched by life," she said, setting the plate down. Rachel almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she told her everything. She spoke until the sun came up. About the pregnancy, the hospital, the years of silence, the knock at the door. Mrs. Jenkins didn't flinch. "Everyone has a shadow," she said, "but not everyone gets a second chance to stand in the light. Don't waste yours, sweetheart." The words clung to Rachel like oxygen. She started writing the next morning. A letter to Ethan, not an apology. She'd already given too many of those in her mind, but a story. Her story. She wrote about her dreams, her fears, the truth behind every silence. She poured it all out. And when she finished, she didn't feel whole, but she felt awake. Rachel didn't mail the letter. Not right away. She read it over and over again, making sure every word felt honest, raw, but not self-serving. It wasn't meant to win Ethan back or to erase the past. It was meant to be her truth, offered without condition. 3 days after writing it, she walked to the small post office 2 blocks away and dropped it in the box. As it slid from her fingers, something shifted inside her. Not peace, but a release. Back home, she did something she hadn't done in years. She picked up her guitar. It was dusty, strings loose, but still whole, like her. Her fingers hesitated at first, unsure, clumsy. But then, slowly, familiar chords returned. She didn't sing, not yet. Just played, letting the vibrations soak into her bones like medicine. That night, she didn't dream of Ethan crying. She dreamed of him listening. A week passed, then another. Then one afternoon, as she sat on the front steps watering the plants she usually forgot, a letter appeared in her mailbox. It was from Ethan. It wasn't long, just a page, but it changed everything. He said he read her letter 3 times. That he didn't know how to feel yet. That part of him was still angry, confused, but another part understood. "You were a kid too," he wrote, "and kids mess up." I think I needed to hear that. Rachel read the letter until the ink felt memorized. It didn't promise anything, but it wasn't goodbye. It was a beginning. She started going to therapy, something she'd avoided for years out of fear of what it might dig up. At first it was hard. Talking about Ethan, about Jason, about her parents. But every session peeled away a layer, not to forget, but to finally feel. She also began journaling, playing guitar more, writing songs again. Songs that told stories of regret, love, second chances. Some days, she'd cry mid-verse. Other days, she'd just hum and feel human again. Rachel didn't chase Ethan. She gave him space, sent short letters once a month, careful not to overwhelm. Sometimes he replied, sometimes he didn't. But each exchange was a thread, a stitch in something slowly mending. For the first time, Rachel didn't feel like she was running from who she had been. She was walking, slowly, uncertainly, toward who she still might become. The second letter Ethan sent was different. This time, it was longer, 3 pages, but colder. He wrote about his adoptive parents, Mark and Linda Walker, how they loved him deeply and never hid the truth. He knew from a young age that he had been left at a hospital, and for years he imagined who that woman might have been. He said he always thought she was dead, that she'd died young or was sick or lost and unable to come back. That was easier to believe than abandonment. Now, knowing Rachel was alive and had chosen to leave was a wound he didn't know how to close. Rachel sat on her bed after reading it, knees tucked to her chest, letter shaking in her hands. She didn't cry this time. She didn't panic. But the ache inside her returned with new teeth. This wasn't going to be easy. The next time Ethan visited, he brought his adoptive mother. Linda was kind but protective, her eyes scanning Rachel like someone trying to solve a puzzle they didn't trust. Rachel didn't blame her. She'd missed 15 years. Linda had lived every one of them. The conversation was stiff. Ethan said little. Rachel tried, but her words felt rehearsed, forced. Linda did most of the talking, about Ethan's love for music, his grades, how he was thinking about applying to a conservatory. Rachel smiled politely, heart twisting. Music, the thing that once connected her to the world, now connected them, silently. But when she tried to suggest going to one of his recitals, Ethan's expression changed. "I'm not ready for that," he said, eyes down. Rachel nodded, swallowing the sting. That night she sat by the window again, old habits returning like ghosts. Doubt crept in. Maybe she should stop. Maybe this was only reopening scars. For both of them. But the next morning she did something different. She wrote another letter. Not to Ethan this time, but to herself. She wrote about forgiveness. About staying present. About being a mother in whatever way he would allow. She folded the note and placed it in a jar beside her bed. A reminder that healing isn't a straight line. It's a messy, tangled climb with slips and setbacks. Over the following months, things got better and worse and better again. Sometimes Ethan called her. Once, they met for coffee and talked about music for 2 hours. Other times, he disappeared for weeks. Rachel learned not to panic. She let him set the pace, and in doing so, slowly, he let her in. It was a cold evening in December when Rachel received the message. Just a short text from Ethan. "There's a winter recital next Friday. I'm playing. You can come, if you want." She read it 3 times, her hands trembling, unsure if it was real. Her heart raced with fear and hope all at once. This was the invitation she'd longed for, but hadn't dared to expect. The day of the recital, Rachel arrived early and sat in the back row. The auditorium was warm, filled with murmurs and shuffling programs. She hadn't seen Ethan in weeks. Her fingers clutched the folded program in her lap, eyes scanning until she found his name near the bottom. Ethan Walker, Reverie, Claude Debussy. When he stepped onto the stage, time froze. He looked taller, more confident. Yet Rachel saw the nerves in his posture, the way he adjusted the music stand 3 times before beginning. Then he lifted his violin. The first note was soft, barely a whisper, but it held something raw, something searching. The piece unfolded slowly, each measure a mixture of elegance and ache. As the notes drifted through the room, Rachel felt her chest tighten. This was her son, her child, and he was beautiful. She didn't cry until the final note. When the bow lifted and silence settled, something inside her broke open. Tears spilled freely, but she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, like rain that had waited too long. After the performance, parents and students mingled in the lobby. Rachel stood near the exit, unsure if she should wait. She didn't want to pressure him, but then she saw him, walking toward her. Alone. He stopped just a few feet away. "You came," he said. "I did." "You cried." "I did." There was a pause. Then, with quiet hesitation, Ethan pulled something from his coat pocket. A photo. Old, faded, worn at the edges. It showed a newborn wrapped in a blue blanket. Ethan's first picture taken at the hospital. "I've kept this my whole life," he said. "Didn't know why, just felt like it mattered." Rachel's throat tightened. She recognized that blanket. She remembered folding it carefully, whispering his name into it. "I'm sorry," she said, barely audible. "I know," he replied. Another pause. This one longer. Then Ethan did something she didn't expect. He stepped forward and hugged her. Not tightly, not for long, but enough. Enough to say, "I don't have all the answers, but I'm not running away." Rachel clung to the moment, unsure if it would last. But for now, it was real. And it was more than enough. In the weeks that followed, something subtle shifted. Ethan began texting her more often, little things, songs he was learning, quotes he liked, questions about her music. Rachel responded, careful not to overstep, but always open. They didn't pretend the past hadn't happened. They didn't force the present to be perfect, but they allowed space for something new. Healing, it turned out, didn't always come with big declarations or dramatic speeches. Sometimes it came in quiet moments, in music played with emotion, in photos shared with trembling hands, in a hug given freely. Rachel began to feel something she hadn't known in years: peace, not because everything was fixed, but because something was growing. Connection, trust, maybe even love. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to earn Ethan's forgiveness. She just had to show up over and over and be real. And that, more than anything, was enough. Some stories aren't meant to tie up neatly. They don't end with perfection or erasure. They end with growth, slow, uneven, but real. Rachel's journey was never about undoing the past. It was about learning to live with it, to face it, and to let it shape her into someone better. She learned that love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent persistence. It's showing up even when you're afraid. It's listening more than speaking. And sometimes it's letting go of your idea of how things should be so something real can grow in its place. Rachel also learned that redemption isn't something you demand. It's something you earn moment by moment, with honesty, with patience, with the willingness to sit in discomfort without reaching for easy escape. Most of all, she discovered that forgiveness isn't a gift someone gives you. It's a space they allow you to step into. And when Ethan opened that space, Rachel didn't rush in. She walked slowly, carefully, knowing that what was being built between them was fragile but sacred. This story reminds us that even in our biggest mistakes, we are not beyond the reach of grace. That sometimes the hardest person to forgive is ourselves, and that healing begins when we finally try. Rachel didn't become famous. She never chased stages or sold-out shows, but music returned to her life like a long-lost friend. She started teaching guitar lessons at the local community center, mostly to kids whose parents needed a safe, affordable place to leave them after school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. Each lesson reminded her that even small actions can echo loud, that sharing a piece of yourself, even quietly, can still change someone's day. She also began speaking at support groups, rooms filled with young women who, like her younger self, felt trapped, afraid, ashamed. She didn't tell them what to do. She just told them the truth, that mistakes don't have to define you, and that even after the worst choices, there's still a way forward. As for Ethan, he kept playing. He auditioned for a conservatory and got in. His music, once a shield, became a bridge to himself, to others, even to Rachel. They didn't become the perfect mother and son duo, but they became something real, honest, ongoing. Sometimes he'd visit for dinner, sometimes just a phone call, and every now and then he'd bring his violin and play. And every time he did, Rachel listened, grateful, present, whole. What would you do if the person who left you behind knocked on your door, or worse? What if you were the one who walked away? Rachel and Ethan's story isn't just about a mother and a son. It's about the weight of choices and the courage it takes to face them. It's about how pain doesn't disappear, but it can transform into understanding, into connection, maybe even into love. So now we ask you, have you ever had to forgive someone who hurt you deeply, or asked for forgiveness you weren't sure you deserved? Tell us in the comments. Share your story, your moment of reckoning, or the bridge you built back to someone. You never know who might need to hear it. And if this story moved you, helped you reflect, or reminded you of someone, send it to them. Subscribe for more stories like this, real, raw, and full of heart. And don't forget to like the video. It helps us reach more people who need to know they're not alone. Because sometimes healing begins not with answers, but with a voice saying, "I'm still here and I'm listening."